The galaxy believed humanity was finished before it ever truly began. That belief lasted for 300 years, until a single impossible signal shattered the silence and made the stars themselves seem afraid. For centuries, Earth had lived under the shadow of the galactic dominion. Humans were not slaves, but they were not free either. They paid tribute. They followed rules written in alien languages. They were watched, measured, and quietly dismissed as a weak, short-lived species that had arrived too late to matter. And yet, humanity remembered. They remembered the EFS Horizon Dawn, the first deep space vessel ever built entirely by human hands. It had launched long before the Dominion arrived, long before treaties and restrictions. It carried 12,000 volunteers, scientists, engineers, artists, farmers, dreamers, toward a star system no human had ever seen. It was slow. It was fragile. But it carried hope. 6 months after launch, the Horizon Dawn vanished. Its final transmission spoke of warped space, broken physics, and a gravity well that should not exist. Then silence. No debris. No radiation. No trace. The Dominion later declared it proof of human recklessness. Earth mourned, and over time, hope faded into legend. But legends have a way of surviving. 300 years later, deep in Dominion-controlled space, Commander Veelrix Tarn stood aboard the patrol cruiser Silent Authority. Veelrix was old by Dominion standards, his silver-blue skin marked with ceremonial scars earned through decades of service. He had crushed rebellions, enforced borders, and watched countless species bend to imperial rule. This patrol was meant to be routine. Until the sensors screamed. The anomaly appeared without warning, a distortion so sharp it made the stars around it bend like reflections in broken glass. Veelrix stared at the display, his 4 eyes narrowing. Space folded inward, then outward, as if reality itself were inhaling. "Confirm readings," he ordered calmly, though unease coiled in his chest. "All sensors agree," replied Technician Serakal, her voice tight. "This is not a natural phenomenon. It is structured." A probe was launched. It never came back. Then the distortion opened fully, and something emerged. It was a ship. Not a warship. Not a station. Something far larger, and far stranger. Its surface flowed like liquid metal, shifting patterns that hurt to look at directly. No visible engines. No weapons. No markings of any known species. It did not push against space, it ignored it. The bridge fell silent. "This design does not match any known civilization," Serakal whispered. Veelrix felt a cold realization form. Search historical archives. Pre-Dominion era. Obsolete records. Seconds later, Serakal froze. "Commander, I found something." The symbol that appeared on the screen was crude, ancient, and unmistakable. Human. Before Veelrix could speak, the ship transmitted a message. No encryption. No threat. Just a calm, steady voice translated instantly into Dominion Standard. "This is the Earth vessel Horizon Dawn. We request safe passage to our home system. We are returning." Veelrix felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. The Horizon Dawn was a myth. A failed experiment. A footnote in imperial education. Yet the ship before him made Dominion cruisers look like relics. Worse, its energy readings were impossible. Infinite loops. Closed systems. Power without decay. "This cannot be the same ship," Veelrix said, though he no longer believed it. The vessel did not slow as it moved forward. Dominion protocol demanded force. Veelrix hesitated. "Open a channel," he said finally. The human voice returned at once, as if it had been waiting. "We mean no harm. But we will not stop." "Your ship violates Dominion space," Veelrix replied. "You will submit to inspection." There was a pause, not of hesitation, but of consideration. "Commander," the voice said gently, "we were lost longer than your empire has ruled this region. We learned many things where we went. Please do not make this difficult." Against his will, Veelrix ordered weapons to charge. The Horizon Dawn responded, not with weapons, but with silence. Then every system on the Silent Authority went dark. No lights. No gravity. No power. For one terrifying heartbeat, Veilrix floated in absolute blackness, convinced he was about to die. Then everything returned. The human ship had not fired a shot, had not damaged a single circuit. It had simply reminded them. "We are still choosing peace," the voice said. "Do not mistake that for weakness." Veilrix lowered his head. He knew when power was absolute. "Pass freely," he ordered. "No Dominion vessel will interfere." The Horizon Dawn slipped past like a living thought and vanished into folded space. Across the galaxy, alarms spread. Admirals argued. Scientists panicked. The Dominion Emperor demanded answers that no one could give. On Earth, people gathered in the streets as a new star appeared in the sky, growing brighter by the hour. For the first time in generations, humans did not look up in fear. They looked up in wonder. High above Earth, aboard the Horizon Dawn, Captain Alara Miles watched her ancestral home fill the viewport. She had been born between stars, raised in a place where time behaved differently and survival required constant invention. Humanity had not merely endured. It had evolved. "Signal Earth," she said softly. "Tell them we're home." Behind her stood humans unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, changed, strengthened, but still unmistakably human. And somewhere deep within the Dominion, an empire built on certainty began to realize a terrifying truth. Humanity had not been lost. It had been preparing. The return of the Horizon Dawn did not feel like a victory at first. It felt like a question, one the galaxy was not ready to answer. On Earth, governments scrambled. Old alliances resurfaced. Emergency councils met through the night as the impossible ship settled into orbit like a silent guardian. For 300 years, humanity had lived cautiously, conditioned to believe survival meant obedience. Now, something had changed in the sky, and with it, something stirred in the human soul. Captain Alara Miles stood before Earth's unified council through a direct quantum link. She looked human, but not quite the way the council remembered humans. Her posture was relaxed, her eyes calm, carrying the weight of centuries without appearing tired. "We are your descendants," she said simply. "We did not abandon you. We were displaced." The council demanded explanations. Where had they gone? How had they survived? Why had they returned now? Alara answered carefully. Time had not flowed normally where the Horizon Dawn had been trapped. 300 years had passed in the galaxy. For the ship, it had been far longer, long enough for generations to be born, live, and die among the stars. They had fallen into a region where space folded in on itself, a place beyond maps and empires. There, human science had failed first. Then human creativity had taken over. "We learned to listen instead of force," Alara said. "To adapt instead of dominate." Physics became negotiable. Across Dominion space, the reaction was very different. The Emperor of the Dominion had ruled longer than human civilization had existed. His advisors filled the Grand Chamber with frantic reports, energy readings that defied conservation laws, movement faster than known limits, systems immune to disruption. "This is not possible," the Emperor hissed. "Humans are fragile. They break." "They did," replied the High Scholar quietly. "And then they rebuilt themselves." The Emperor ordered a full military mobilization around Earth. Hundreds of warships moved into position, forming a ring of steel meant to remind humanity of its place. On Earth, fear returned, but it did not take hold. For the first time, humans knew they were not alone. Captain Alara watched the Dominion fleet assemble from orbit. She did not raise shields. She did not power weapons. Instead, she opened a channel broadcast to every ship, every world, every listening ear. "We remember what it is to be small," she said. "We remember fear. We remember kneeling." Her voice carried no anger. "But we also remember who we are." The Horizon Dawn shifted. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Space around it softened, as if reality itself were bending in greeting. Human engineers aboard the ship adjusted systems that had no physical controls, interfaces woven into thought, memory, and shared intention. A Dominion admiral ordered a warning shot. The beam struck empty space. The Horizon Dawn was no longer where it had been. It reappeared behind the fleet. No explosion followed. No counterattack. Instead, every Dominion ship received a complete schematic of its own systems, annotated, corrected, and improved. "You build strong things," Ilara said calmly. "But you stop thinking once they work." Humans never had that luxury. Dominion crews stared in disbelief as errors, inefficiencies, and ancient design flaws were exposed line by line. "We could disable you," Ilara continued. "We could end your empire in moments. But we won't." "Why?" demanded the Emperor over an open channel, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Because survival taught us something," Ilara replied. "Power that only destroys eventually destroys itself." Silence followed. Then, slowly, the Dominion fleet withdrew. Across the galaxy, subject species watched in awe. For the first time in known history, the Dominion had stepped back, not from war, but from humanity. On Earth, people wept openly. Not from fear, but from release. Children watched the sky knowing they might one day reach it freely. Old humans felt chains they had carried all their lives finally loosen. Yet aboard the Horizon Dawn, Ilara was not celebrating. She knew the truth. The Empire was wounded, not defeated. Pride never died easily. And humanity's return had shifted the balance of the galaxy forever. "We have announced ourselves," her first officer said quietly. "There's no going back." Ilara nodded. "That's fine," she said. "We didn't come back to hide." Far beyond the stars, ancient forces stirred, civilizations older than the Dominion, watchers who had noticed the same impossible signal centuries ago. Humanity had returned, and the universe was beginning to pay attention. The Dominion believed it had seen the worst of the consequences. It was wrong. Long before the Horizon Dawn vanished, long before the Dominion rose to power, there were others who watched the galaxy quietly. They did not conquer. They did not rule. They waited. Civilizations called them myths, then forgot them entirely. They were known, in fragmented records, as the archivists. When the Horizon Dawn folded space without force, when it rewrote physics as if the rules were optional, the archivists noticed. To them, this was not a threat. It was a curiosity far more dangerous. In the dark between galaxies, something ancient turned its attention back toward the Milky Way. On Earth, Captain Ilara Miles felt the change before any sensor did. The Horizon Dawn hummed differently, its systems reacting as if responding to a distant echo. "They're here," murmured Dr. Arun Kale, the ship's chief theoretician. He was human in shape but carried subtle modifications, neural lattices grown rather than built, the result of centuries of adaptation. "Something is observing us." Ilara did not ask how he knew. Human intuition, sharpened by survival, had become frighteningly accurate. Within hours, Earth skies darkened, not with ships, but with silence. Satellites lost signal. Long-range communications failed. The stars themselves seemed dimmer. Then the message came. It did not arrive through technology. It arrived through thought. Every human, on Earth and aboard the Horizon Dawn, felt it at the same time. "You are not permitted." Panic swept the planet. People collapsed, clutched their heads, or froze in terror. The message was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried authority older than fear. Ilara steadied herself. She had faced impossible things before. "Respond," she said. The Horizon Dawn answered not with words, but with presence. Space twisted gently, forming a vast, translucent structure above Earth, an eye the size of a continent, composed of layered dimensions sliding over one another. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The archivist spoke again, this time with clarity. "Species of Earth. You have crossed thresholds without permission. You manipulate existence without understanding its cost. Return to your limits. Or be corrected." The Dominion, watching from afar, felt a cold relief. Whatever the humans were, they were no longer the biggest concern. Ilara opened a channel, though she did not know if it would matter. We didn't cross anything, she said evenly. We survived. The archivist paused. Survival is not justification. Neither is extinction, Ilara replied. A ripple of pressure rolled across the planet. Mountains trembled. Oceans shuddered. The message was clear. The archivists could erase Earth without effort. Dr. Kale stepped forward. They expect fear, he said quietly. Or defiance. What do they not expect? Ilara asked. Kale smiled faintly. Curiosity. Ilara nodded once. She gave the order. The Horizon Dawn opened itself, not to attack, but to share. Streams of information flowed outward, records of human history, art created in the void, generations born without a sky, failures turned into lessons, and technologies built not to dominate, but to adapt. The archivist recoiled, not in pain, but in shock. You expose internal records? It demanded. Why reveal weakness? Because it's how we grow, Ilara said. You watch. We live. Silence followed, longer than before. Then the archivist acted. A test. Space fractured above the Pacific, forming a rift that bled raw entropy. Physics collapsed within it. Anything entering would cease to exist, not destroyed, but undone. The archivist's judgment was simple. If humanity could close the wound without violence, they would be allowed to continue. If not, Earth would be erased for safety. The Horizon Dawn moved instantly. Not alone. Across Earth, humans responded. Scientists, engineers, artists, and thinkers, connected through networks the Dominion had never understood, began working as one. Ideas flowed freely. No ranks. No orders. Just shared purpose. Humanity did not build a weapon. They built a solution. The Horizon Dawn extended a lattice of probability anchors, stabilizing the rift not by force, but by agreement, teaching space how to exist again. Human mathematics blended with intuition, physics with philosophy. It took minutes. The rift closed like a healed wound. The archivist went silent. Then, slowly, the massive eye dissolved into starlight. Conclusion recorded, it said at last. Humanity is anomalous. Not hostile. Not compliant. Adaptive beyond prediction. Observation will continue. Interference withdrawn. The pressure vanished. The stars returned. Earth breathed again. Across the planet, humans collapsed in exhausted relief. Some laughed. Some cried. Some simply stared at the sky, realizing how close they had come to oblivion. The Dominion watched in horror. The humans had not just survived an ancient judgment. They had passed it. On the Horizon Dawn, Ilara leaned against the railing, her hands trembling at last. We just changed the rules again, her first officer said softly. Ilara looked down at Earth, at the fragile world that had refused to break. No, she replied. We reminded the universe why we matter. Far away, deep within Dominion space, the Emperor stared at the last reports and understood something terrifying. Humanity was no longer rising. It had arrived. The Dominion Emperor had ruled by certainty. For 2,000 years, the galaxy obeyed because resistance had always ended the same way. Burned worlds, erased histories, broken species. Fear was efficient. Fear was stable. Humanity had shattered that stability without firing a single shot. In the silent halls of the Imperial Core, the Emperor stared at the holographic projection of Earth. The human world glowed softly, fragile and alive, protected not by fleets, but by something far worse. Choice. They humiliated us, the Emperor said quietly. His advisors stood frozen, afraid to speak. They turned our strength into irrelevance. One advisor finally gathered courage. Your Majesty, open war would be unwise. The Emperor's eyes burned. Then we will not fight them directly. Across Dominion space, secret orders were issued. Sleeper fleets activated. Old alliances were pressured. Subject species were reminded of ancient punishments. The message was subtle but clear. Humanity must be isolated, starved of cooperation, cut away from the galaxy before others followed their example. Fear would return. Or so the Emperor believed. What he did not understand was that humans had spent 300 years being isolated already. On Earth, Captain Ilara Miles addressed a gathering unlike any before it. Representatives from dozens of species, some Dominion subjects, some neutral traders, some long-forgotten civilizations, listened from secure channels. "We are not asking you to choose us," Ilara said plainly. "We are asking you to choose yourselves." She showed them data. Not weapons. Not threats. Stories. Worlds stripped of resources. Cultures erased for efficiency. Species frozen at technological levels deemed safe. The quiet cruelty of the Dominion laid bare. "We survived because we had to," Ilara continued. "You don't have to do it alone anymore." One by one, voices responded. A mining species that had lost half its population to imperial quotas. A trader coalition crushed under unfair laws. A scholar race forbidden from exploring beyond assigned sectors. They had all endured. Quietly. Until now. The Dominion felt the shift immediately. Trade routes faltered. Patrol fleets encountered resistance. Not violence, but refusal. Worlds stopped paying tribute. Not in rebellion, but in unity. The Emperor roared in fury. "Deploy the Purity Armada," he commanded. It was the Dominion's final answer, a massive force designed not to conquer, but to erase. Its target was Earth. When the Armada entered the system, the sky darkened with metal. Hundreds of warships formed a wall meant to remind humanity what true power looked like. The Horizon Dawn rose to meet them. Ilara did not feel fear. She felt sadness. "This doesn't have to happen," she transmitted openly. The Emperor responded at last, his voice filled with rage and pride. "You are an anomaly. An error. The galaxy must be stable. And you make stability impossible." "Then stability was never worth keeping," Ilara replied. The Armada fired. Space screamed. Energy that could tear apart stars surged toward Earth. The Dominion expected shields, counterfire, resistance. Instead, the Horizon Dawn expanded. Not physically, conceptually. Human technology unfolded across probability itself, creating a field where destructive intent simply lost meaning. The Dominion weapons struck the field and unraveled, their energy redirected into harmless light. The Armada panicked. Humanity did not attack. They advanced. The Horizon Dawn moved through the fleet, touching ships gently, rewriting systems at the most fundamental level. Weapons became inert. Engines shut down peacefully. Crews found themselves safe, alive, and unable to fight. Within minutes, the Purity Armada was neutralized, floating, powerless, intact. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Ilara opened one final channel. "This ends now," she said. "No more empires built on fear. No more silence enforced by violence." The Emperor screamed defiance, but his words carried no weight. Across the Dominion, worlds declared independence. Fleets stood down. The Empire did not fall in flames. It simply stopped being obeyed. On Earth, people watched the stars with tears in their eyes. Not because they had won a war, but because they hadn't lost themselves in the process. Humanity had faced annihilation and chosen restraint. Chosen cooperation. Chosen to be better. Aboard the Horizon Dawn, Ilara closed her eyes. "It's over," her first officer said softly. "No," Ilara replied. "It's beginning." Far beyond known space, ancient watchers recorded the outcome. Noting something unprecedented. A species that gained absolute power, and refused to abuse it. The galaxy had changed forever. And humanity stood at the center of that change. The galaxy did not celebrate the end of the Dominion. There were no fireworks in space, no great victory songs echoing between stars. Empires did not fall that way. They ended quietly, like a breath finally released after being held too long. Across thousands of worlds, something unfamiliar spread. Relief. For generations, entire species had lived under rules they did not write, boundaries they could not cross, and limits imposed in the name of order. When the Dominion fleets powered down and the Emperor's commands went unanswered, fear did not vanish overnight. But it weakened. And into that fragile moment stepped humanity. Captain Ilara Miles addressed the galaxy one final time. Her message carried not through Dominion networks, but through open channels anyone could access. There was no demand in her voice. No authority claimed. Power changes things, she said. We learned that the hard way. She spoke of the centuries aboard the Horizon Dawn, of children born without gravity, of mistakes that nearly destroyed them, of technology built from desperation rather than ambition. Humanity had not survived because it was strongest. It survived because it adapted. We won't replace one empire with another, Ilara continued. We won't tell you how to live. But we will help you stand on your own. Some doubted her. Many watched cautiously. Then humanity acted. Human engineers helped rebuild worlds stripped by overmining. Medical knowledge erased plagues long ignored because curing them was inefficient. Navigation data unlocked safe paths through dangerous regions the Dominion had forbidden. And always, humans shared, not controlled. The archivists observed from the edges of existence, recording something they had never seen before. A species that reached beyond limits not to dominate, but to connect. On Earth, life changed slowly, but unmistakably. Children studied alien languages not as curiosities, but as future friendships. Starports expanded, not for warships, but for travelers. Humans looked outward again, not with longing, but with purpose. The Horizon Dawn remained in orbit for a time, its presence a reminder of where humanity had been, and what it had become. Ilara stood once more in the observation chamber, watching Earth turn beneath her. Blue oceans. Green land. Clouds drifting without care for empires or wars. Her first officer joined her quietly. They're calling this era the human opening, he said. Not an age. An invitation. Ilara smiled. That's fitting. Far away, on a quiet world once ruled by Dominion law, a former Imperial officer stared at the stars. For the first time in his long life, he was free to choose where he stood. He chose hope. The Emperor himself was never formally deposed. He remained alive, isolated on his throne world, surrounded by silence. His empire had not been taken from him. It had simply outgrown him. In the end, no one feared humanity. They respected it. And that frightened the universe far more. Before the Horizon Dawn finally departed Earth orbit, its mission no longer singular, Ilara recorded one last message, stored in the ship's archives and shared freely across the stars. We were lost, she said. Not because space is vast, but because we didn't yet know who we were. She spoke of curiosity, the human instinct to ask what if even when the answer was dangerous. Of creativity, the refusal to accept that things must remain broken. Of resilience, the quiet strength to stand back up after falling into the unknown. We didn't return as conquerors, Ilara said. We returned as proof. Proof that intelligence does not require cruelty. Proof that power does not demand fear. Proof that even in a cold universe, warmth can survive. The Horizon Dawn folded space one last time, not vanishing, but becoming something else, a moving bridge between worlds, a promise that humanity would not disappear into myth again. Across the galaxy, new stories began. Some were about humans. Many were inspired by them. And somewhere, far beyond time and stars, the archivists recorded their final conclusion on the matter. Humanity. Uncontainable. Not because it seeks control, but because it refuses to stop imagining what comes next. The story did not end. It never would. Because as long as humans looked at the stars, they would ask the same question they always had. What's out there, and what can we become?